Hey everyone, here is a presentation on the Great Vowel Shift. First of all, what is the Great Vowel Shift? It's often associated with Geoffrey Chaucer because his writing took place right in the middle of this Great Vowel Shift, and you can actually see some of the changes happening in his work, which I'll show you an example of in a moment. But before the Great Vowel Shift, writing was pretty inconsistent because people wrote things as they heard them, which meant that people would spell things a little bit differently. So it was really hard to standardize the English language and spelling just because everybody was using it a little bit differently. So here's an example. This is from the Canterbury Tales General Prologue. And if you look on this side of the page, you can see the original writing from Geoffrey Chaucer. This is how he spelled everything. And if you look just in particular at this word April, it's the month of April. And here's the translation on this side. Someone from Florida State University actually did this translation to make it a little bit easier on their students. But you can really see these differences in spelling March, the month of March. And I'll show you some examples of pronunciations in just a second. But I think you can see just by very quickly reading some of this what the differences were and why it's so associated with Geoffrey Chaucer. So why did this happen? A couple of different reasons. Several have to do with the plague. You've all heard of the Black Death or the plague. And it arose during several different periods of time, and we know now that the outbreaks were due to poor sanitation habits. But they didn't know what was leading to this. They didn't know why it was spreading, and so there was a lot of confusion. People would move southward because the weather was better. I mean, sort of if you imagine even here living in the north, it's much, much colder. People spent more time inside, which would lead the plague to spread easier from person to person. And because it spread amongst all of the classes, the upper class, and I noted here the monarchy spoke French or Latin, but they also suffered from the plague. And so the lower classes were able to sort of be upwardly mobile in life. And so because people who spoke English in the lower and middle classes sort of rose up through society, they brought their language with them, and other people started to speak English more often. In addition, the language contact, because it was easier to travel, plus there were some wars, so people were going from place to place, and whenever you're going from place to place, you bring your language with you, and sometimes people, different groups of people would interact with one another and influence one another with their use of language. And then the most important is the printing press in 1440. It helped standardize the spelling, because if things were going to be printed, there needed to be one way to spell the word April, and so things began to change then. So what does all of this mean? That you will, as this course goes on, need to rely on translations less and less. If you keep that in mind as we're going along through this semester, you'll see when we get to Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, you don't need to have every single word explained to you because it's much easier to read, and that's because of the Great Vowel Shift. Okay, so what did it sound like? I know English teachers always say we're not supposed to use Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is actually the best example of the Great Vowel Shift that I found. So here's a couple of examples. Just listen really closely and notice it's going to play all of these different pronunciations. You've got the different time periods that it's introducing here. So first I'm going to do the word bite.
Beat, bait, bait, bite.
So you can really hear what the difference in time period, how it's changed along. And this is meat and meat. Of course, they're synonyms for us, so I'm going to play this.
Meat, meat, meat.
Now the word meat.
Net, meat, meat.
So I think it's really interesting to note that they're synonyms to us, but they used to be very, very different. There's a link to Wikipedia in the PowerPoint if you want to go play around with some of the others, because I think it's pretty interesting. Hope you enjoyed it.